Hello and welcome once again to Forgotten Florida. In this episode, Madeline and I are in an old cemetery in Southport. In fact, we are at the old Southport Cemetery in Southport. And why are we in a cemetery in Southport? To tell the story of this man here, Big John Cannon. Why are we in a cemetery talking about Big John Cannon? That's a good question, because I feel that coming to the resting places of people connects the story better. This is a real story, and the main character is laying right here. And why are we telling this man's story? Because the repercussions of his actions are still being felt today in Southport. A butterfly effect? Maybe. I don't know. But when's the last time you saw a restaurant advertising Southport Oysters? Exactly. Today, Southport is all just a forgotten suburb in Panama City. But in 1915, things were much different. There barely was a Panama City then, and Southport was a major part of the Florida oyster industry, much like Apalachicola is now. Southport was known for having big, sweet, juicy oysters. And as the oyster industry grew in Southport, so did tension within this industry. You see, up until a couple years before, there were no laws governing fishing in the state of Florida. There was no FWC protecting fish and game. There was no FWC, period. So on June 4th, 1913, the Florida legislature created the Shellfish Commission. Its purpose was to, quote, encourage, protect, regulate, and develop the shellfish industry of the state of Florida, end quote. They took ownership of oysters, clams, and whelks, defining them as shellfish. It also created the Office of Shellfish Commissioner and defined the powers of the office. It allowed for the leasing of oyster beds to either Florida residents or corporations that are allowed to do business in the state of Florida. So, as one can imagine, the sudden regulation of an industry that was based on one's perceived God-given right to go fishing anytime they want to go fishing did not go over very well. Men were told that the oyster beds that their families had tonged for generations were now off limits, and if they tonged there, they could get arrested. Was not very popular with the local fishermen, to say the least. So in 1913, the governor of Florida appointed T.R. Hodges to be the first guy to head the Shellfish Commission. He was the commissioner. He served as a captain of the Navy in WW1 and was known for his impeccable style of dress. He was known for his bleached white uniform and would sometimes change several times a day to maintain his image. As anyone living in Florida can attest, it is hard to maintain your image. He was not well liked by his regulated subjects. They accused him of living highly at the expense of the state, acting like a, quote, European monarch, and claimed that he had disdain for the fishermen. But in reality, T.R. Hodges was a visionary, and he was trying to look out for their livelihoods. But let's get back to the story. In 1915, Big John Cannon was here tonging the North Bay for oysters. And here in Southport, the dirty politics of the new fishing industry caught Big John and many others off guard. The bountiful oyster beds Cannon had lived off of were now leased property to a company formed by a preacher named Anderson and another local man named Jim Youngblood, who together had bought up almost every single oyster bed in the North Bay, and both of these men are laying right here in the old Southport Cemetery. So, like I said, the Southport fishermen were furious. The vast oyster beds they had normally tonged had now all been leased out. They had been completely blindsided by Anderson and Jim Youngblood. And if you have visited or lived in Panama City, you will know that that name Anderson is still around today. You see it on boats, you see it on restaurants. A lot of people have it in their last name. It is still a very big name to this day. But back to Big John Cannon. He was known to have little education but tons of courage. Locals described him as a fearless man, not even scared of the devil. Wearing his recognizable black Stetson hat, everyone knew when Big John Cannon was out on the water, his silhouette looming out on the distant horizon. As Big John John and other fishermen saw the new signs being put up everywhere that they fished, they chose to ignore them. No one was going to stop them from oystering, especially somebody up in Tallahassee. So on Friday, January 8th, 1915, Big John and his 12-year-old son, Junie, decided it was a perfect day for tonging, and they hit the oyster beds. Also on that same morning, Shellfish Officer Moses John Dykes and his partner R.D. Gilbert had a warrant John Cannon's arrest and set sail on North Bay looking for their man. They sailed to Alligator Point, led there by a man named Roland Mason. Once there, they found John Cannon and several other fishermen tonging. They told Cannon that he was under arrest. Big John put up an argue and eventually complied to go with him, but asking if they could first go back to his dock first since he had his son with him. The deputies complied. At his dock, Big John was playing stalling games so he and his son could offload their oysters. Big John knew he would need the money from them oysters to get himself out of trouble, and trying to stall for more time, he asked if he could change out of his wet clothes. But by this time, Constable Dykes' patience had worn thin, and he was tired of the games and silly antics. He pulled out his .38 revolver and pointed it at Big John. Something happened. Some sort of a fight happened, and in the process, Constable Dykes ended up firing twice at Big John, missing both times. One of the bullets actually went through the brim of his hat. During this fight, Cannon was able to pull a shotgun out and shoot Officer Dykes square in the chest, basically killing him on the spot. He died later. And thus, Moses Dykes was the first and only shellfish officer killed in the line of duty. So Big John Cannon, a beloved local fisherman, was now a wanted man. He had a $250 bounty put on his head. Cannon found a log raft and anchored up for the night in his beloved North Bay. The next morning, John Cannon came back to town where he was told about Dykes dying. He was able to elude capture until February 14th, 1915. He was caught after bounty hunters found his campsite. They saw a food bucket hanging in a tree. The two bounty hunters waited for Big John Cannon to show up around dinner time, and when Big John Cannon showed up for dinner, the two bounty hunters jumped out of the bushes and were able to take him into custody without a fight. Big John Cannon had had enough of living in the swamp. So John Cannon was arrested and he was put on display in downtown Panama City on Harrison Avenue in what was called the Lion's Pen, a steel cage on wheels that was used as the county's first jail. So in November, John Cannon went on trial. The fishing community was 100% behind John Cannon. He was seen as defending himself and exercising his God-given right. T.R. Hodges, the Shellfish Commission, was furious that one of his officers had been killed. The leases of North Bay were suspended and everything was at stake with the trial. Would the courts respect the life of a fallen officer, or would it side with the rights of a fisherman pursuing their trade? The prosecuting attorney was Ira Hutchinson, a name that is still big in Bay County today. He argued that no man had the right to kill an officer of the law. Cannon's defense attorney, a man by the name of Judge D.K. Middleton, argued that Cannon was merely defending himself from an out-of-control shellfish officer that was not a legitimate police officer, nor did he have a warrant, completely ignoring the fact that yes, he was an official officer of the law and he did have a warrant, nor did he need a warrant. He was caught red-handed. But moving on. So on November 25th, 1915, in the Panama City courthouse, you could hear a needle drop. It's packed out. The tension was palpable. Is that how you say that? Anyways, the judge asked for the foreman to deliver the verdict. Note was passed to the judge and John Cannon was asked to stand to receive his verdict. The suspense was heavy. Not guilty, read the judge. The crowd roared. The prosecution slumped in their chairs. Big John Cannon cried, and T.R. Hodges could not believe his eyes. He just saw someone getting away with murdering one of his men. After the verdict, in the days and weeks to come, T.R. Hodges would get death threats almost daily. along with threats to destroy his beloved boat, the Romer. This led to him having 2 1-pound cannons installed on the boats, one on the fore and one on the aft. The cannons were never fired on any fishermen, but it was taken as a great insult to them that the government would send an armed vessel to watch over them. I found this picture here of the Romer, and here it looks like T.R. Hodges is actually in this photo. I cross-referenced this photo of the Romer with the photo of it as a PT boat, and it was a match. So back to Big John. He went back to doing basically the only thing he knew how to do: fishing and tong in the waters of North Bay. But he was not a violent man. The burden of killing Officer Dykes haunted him the rest of his life. So what happened? In the long run, T.R. Hodges was right. Everything he was trying to fight from happening eventually happened. The oyster beds of North Bay and St. Andrew Bay were either dredged or tonged to extinction, and in most cases, even the clutch was removed. And why did the industry collapse? After the murder of Constable Dyke, T.R. Hodges gave up all the leases here in the North Bay, and no one was here to regulate anymore, and so people just went crazy. They were tonging in and out of season, and before too long, everything was gone. The destruction continued until the industry collapsed on itself, allowing Apalachicola to become the leader in the Florida oyster industry to this day. Like I said, when's the last time you had a Southport oyster? And this has been Forgotten Florida. Please like and subscribe, and if you know someone that loves obscure Florida history, then share this video with them too. And if you can contribute to our Patreon, we would love that. All that information is in the description box. Thanks for tuning in. Have a safe and happy new year. From Wes and Madeline. So in the process of working on this, I came across the Officer Dow Memorial page, and while searching this page, I noticed that Moses Dykes was not mentioned. So I reached out via email and contacted them, and they searched their records and put up a page for Moses Dykes. Now, in my story, he was referred to as a Shellfish Deputy. Here, they call him Constable Moses Dykes. And here is the official story from their records. Moses Dykes. Constable Moses Dykes was shot and killed in Southport while arresting a man wanted for violating state oyster laws. The man had been harvesting oysters while trespassing on leased oyster beds. Constable Moses and a deputy from the Florida Shellfish Commission had arrested the man while he was in his boat and allowed him to go to shore. As the man prepared to get off his boat, he pulled out a shotgun that was hidden under the bench and shot Constable Dykes. The Shellfish Commission deputy returned fire as the man fled through the wharf but did not strike him. Constable Dykes died approximately 2 a.m. the following morning. The man who shot him was charged with murder but acquitted at trial by the local fishing population. Constable Dykes was survived by his wife, several children, father, and a brother. His brother served as the Justice of the Peace for Bay County. And here it says in his bio he was 32 when he died. Cause of death, gunfire. Incident date, Saturday, January 9th, 1915. Weapon, shotgun. Anyways, I thought that was pretty cool. That was the first that I have ever had an effect on anything with my little documentaries, but hopefully not a last. And once again, thanks for tuning in to Forgotten Florida.